Welcome everyone to the Hangout. Chip Cooper for FTC Guardian and my partner Alan Cutts. Here we are with the summer fairly passing us by almost. I think we're going to be into August in about a week.
Yep.
And looking like sort of the end of summer, people around here are talking about sending their kids back to school. And I wonder where it all went so fast. Before I turn it over to Alan and see what he's been up to lately, I will share this with you without going into great detail. I did something I've always wanted to do last Friday night. See a live concert by none other than the Rolling Stones. They were wonderful. And the concert was originally scheduled for April of this year, but Mick Jagger had to have heart surgery, right? He's going to be 76 in a couple of months. And all of the other guys in the group are in that same age group. And so they had to reschedule the entire tour. Now people were wondering, if a 76-year-old guy who just is coming off of heart surgery is going to be able to do what he used to do. And I can report he did at least that well and maybe more. He was extremely active, very entertaining. It was a great experience. I thoroughly enjoyed it. And so I'll turn it over to Alan, see what he's been up to.
I don't have anything. I had grandkids for a week. So yeah, we had grandkids check in Saturday for 5 days. So that was after that I slept.
Yeah, you need to take a day off and they kept up on sleep.
Yeah. When they left, we all went to bed. We took a nap.
And part of it is just the activity. We did the grandchildren thing too. It's a lot of movement, but part of it is just the noise and confusion that's associated with it.
Oh yeah,
it's incredible.
So anyway, I've got a hot tub in my yard and outside on the deck, and we had a pool and a hot tub. I had to drain my hot tub twice after they left because they made it so filthy dirty going back and forth in the yard that is just I filled it up, drained it, filled it up, and drained it because it was just so filthy. But
we're so
they had
glad.
A good time. They had a really good time, so that's all that matters.
Yeah, they had a great time. You're so glad to see them, but you're so exhausted when they leave. You just bye. Anyway, all right. So
wait, before we get started, hey, I just want to make sure, can everybody hear us and see us? Make sure you can hear us and see us. And Chip, put your screen on. Make sure that they can see your screen.
Exactly what I was getting ready to do. And this should be the share my screen here. Can you see that?
I can. Anybody else hear us and see us there? Yes. Okay. We got some yeses coming in now. Okay, good.
So they can see us and hear us, and they should be able to see, as you indicated, the title screen there.
Yep.
Right?
Yep. We're good.
You can see the title there. FTC enforces CRFA, which is the acronym for Consumer Review Fairness Act. I almost forgot that. CRFA against small businesses for gag clauses in form agreements. So if you've been a member for a while, you may remember that about a year and a half ago, we had the first of this two-part series regarding CRFA, a new federal statute that is enforced by the Federal Trade Commission. And if you've been a marketer for any period of time online, you know that reviews, good reviews are really very good for you. And you also know that bad, negative reviews can kill you. And so what some enterprising and creative marketers had started doing a few years ago is including a gag clause in their customer agreement. Gag clause, of course, is an agreement not to post any negative reviews. And it started going on. It became sort of a movement. A lot of consumer complaint about it. And there was this CRFA passed in 2017. And what we're following up with tonight is some enforcement actions by the Federal Trade Commission to give you more information about what's going on there and sort of put you on alert. So let me see if I can go to the next slide. Yeah, I was looking at the wrong place. All right, so here we go into the housekeeping announcement. You've seen it many times. The information we're going to present is for informational purposes only. It is not for legal advice, and we're not affiliated with the Federal Trade Commission. So here's the image of a gag clause. What is a gag clause? I've just explained it. This is going to be a very quick review. It's a non-disparagement clause. it involves a contract clause that requires the customer to not post negative reviews. And the question there, of course, and you know the answer already, are they legal? And the answer is no, since 2017, regarding this statute I just mentioned at the outset, known as the Consumer Review Fairness Act, known by the acronym CRFA, passed in 2017. And of course, in very short bullet point form, CRFA voids form contracts that restrict a customer's ability to leave reviews or imposes penalties. And you'll see some of that in just a minute for leaving negative reviews or involving the transfer of IP rights in reviews or feedback. And that last bullet might require a limited amount of explanation here. What happened in a lot of these gag clauses was a clause that says your comments that you might make on our website or anywhere about our business or our website are considered confidential information of us, the owner, right? We own these comments that you might make about our business, our product or service, or our website. And because we own this confidential information, we're going to restrict you from posting these negative reviews. So they tied in the gag clause requirement into intellectual property. Very creative, and we'll see more about that in just a minute or so. Now, this is really important, and you need to really listen up carefully here. CRFA, not CFRA, I'll change that slide later, does not apply to certain things. So it's important if you're a marketer to know that it applies to certain things, but it also does not apply to these four bullets. And you look at the bottom of the slide and you see in yellow there, all of these are okay, right? It's okay. So number one, CRFA applies only to negotiated contracts, or it does not, apply to negotiated contracts. It applies only to form agreements that are not negotiated, such as what many of you have on your website, click-through agreements. That would be a form contract it's not negotiated. It does not apply to contracts with your own employees or your contractors, right? So if you have contractors, assistants who work with you as contractors, and you have a contractor agreement with that assistant, it's fine to have a gag clause in there, right? Number three, it doesn't protect consumers from civil actions for breach of confidentiality, defamation, slander, and libel. So you can obviously make those kinds of legal claims. And then last, it doesn't prohibit removal or reviews from your own website. So you can see there if it's defamatory, obscene, explicit, harassing, etc. And I've highlighted in yellow, false or misleading. So if someone on your blog or forum posts a false or even merely a misleading statement about your product or service, you can remove that without any problem. All of these bullets, these four bullets, are okay. So what's really new here, and the reason that we're presenting this evening here, is that since this statute went into effect and enforced by the Federal Trade Commission, there have been 5 cases. Now, it's important to note, very important to note actually, that they're all against small businesses. And the reason why it's important for us to present this to you is most, if not all, of our members of FTC Guardian are in fact small businesses. So you need to listen up here. And you can see that list here. We're not going to go through all of them in terms of their names, but if you look in the white text there, the first one, A. Waldron HVAC, we'll talk more about that one as an example, but you can see it's a small heating and AC company. The next one, National Floor, is a flooring company, again, small. LVTR, a horseback riding company. The next one, Vacation House Rentals, Short to Please Vacations is the company. And then finally, Stratfordshire Property Management, a fairly small property management company. So these are the targets that the FTC has gone after and will probably continue to do so. That's why it's very important as a small business to be aware of what's going on. And I mentioned that we would zero in a little bit on Waldron HVAC. Here is their standard contract that is not negotiable, at least the terms and conditions aren't. Maybe price is, but terms and conditions are not negotiable. And we're going to zero in here on this confidentiality clause. You can see there in the top left, confidentiality clause, and it says customer and company agree that the within contract is a private and confidential matter. And you remember I mentioned this at the outset, and that the terms and conditions of the contract, including estimates, pricing, etc., are private and confidential and shall not be made public or given to anyone to make public, including the Better Business Bureau. So you can't pass along anything to the BBB. And you're not going to, customer agrees not to file any complaints with the Better Business Bureau and agrees to attempt to resolve their complaints with the customer. And then you can see the company at the bottom, the company may also be awarded fees and costs if this is violated. So, if you're a consumer and you read this and see that there could be an award of fees and costs and actual damages, that sort of thing, you're probably going to be careful not to make any review at all, or if you do, a positive one. So this is the type of clause we're talking about. And here's another one by the Horseback Riding Company. I agree not to call animal control or any governmental agency or individuals if there's any discrepancy as to how the horses or animals or property are taken care of. In the next sentence, you will be charged a minimum of $5,000 in damages if you report anything to the contrary, and you can see the rest of it. I'm not going to go into it. And in the other text below that we're not going to go into, you can see that they're saying that you can make only a 5-star review, and then at the very bottom, which is not highlighted in yellow with an underline, for every violation, I will be charged a $5,000 fine for negative reviews, and it also goes up to $20,000, etc. So this is a pretty onerous one for the relatively small horseback riding company, LVTR. And then finally, sure to please vacations. Vacation house rentals, you see there by signing below, you agree not to defame or leave negative reviews or any review less than a 5-star or absolute best rating. And at the bottom, amazing, breach would cost a consumer $25,000 in liquidated damages. Liquidated damages is a fancy legal term, which really means that the parties, including here the two parties, sure to please vacations and the customer entering into the agreement, have already agreed in advance that the damages for breach would be $25,000. In most cases, there is not a liquidated damages clause in a contract. If you've read a number of contracts, you probably maybe have not ever seen one, because damages are left to be proved later if there is a breach, so you don't agree in advance exactly what the damages would be. But this is pretty stiff for posting a negative review, $25,000 in liquidated damages, and that's just a zero in on what we've talked about. Now, if you look at this slide, you'll see this is a clip for the very top of the complaint by the Federal Trade Commission against Waldron HVAC. And you can also see, as indicated by the arrow pointing there, that one of the managers individually, Thomas J. Waldron, of course, is also named as a defendant here. So we're talking about not only liability for the business entity, which is an LLC, but also for one of the owners, maybe the sole owner, in this case, Thomas J. Waldron. Now, I will mention here that we don't have any fines in this situation or in any of these first 5 cases brought by the Federal Trade Commission. And my guess is that they're trying to roll out a group of, say, these 5 cases at the very beginning to sort of let the word go forth that they are aggressively enforcing this statute. And as we'll see in just a minute with these bullet points, they're attaching a number of requirements to the violation short of imposing a fine. But I think what we're going to see in the future would be in the next wave of these types of actions, we're going to see fines as well. So if we go down this list of what the final order requires, again, they're in bullet form. Number one, injunctive relief, meaning no further gag clauses of any kind. Number two, the requirement that the company notify all of its customers, notify them that the gag clause that they agreed to in the contract is illegal and cannot be enforced, and that the customer can, if they want to, publish honest negative reviews. So all of that has to go out. The next one is there has to be a signed acknowledgement that the order has been received by all of the employees and principals, including owners of the company, and signed receipts, right, that they have seen this order and understand it. The next one is a 3-year record keeping requirement that includes, among other things, copies of all contracts entered into with customers so that the FTC can audit to see if the injunction regarding no further gag clauses has been complied with. There has to be, and next to the last bullet there, sworn compliance reports, which sworn means under oath. And of course, if they're incorrect, it's a serious offense. And then the very interesting one is the last one, compliance monitoring, which in and of itself is not surprising. But in the final order, the FTC said that that could involve, the monitoring could involve the FTC posing as consumers to basically check back to see if the contracts are all the way they should be. In other words, without any gag clause, that the compliance could involve the SEC pretending to be a consumer just to check back. So here are the basic takeaways from this presentation. The statute establishes consumer rights to leave critical views online. It applies only to form contracts, not negotiated contracts or contracts with employees. It doesn't apply to untrue or misleading statements on your website. That's important to know. And then finally, very important to know that the FTC is aggressively enforcing the statute against small businesses. And my guess is that in the next round of enforcement actions, you're likely to see fines as well as all of the other restrictions that we just discussed. So when I upload the replay video tomorrow morning early, these are going to be the tags that I associate with it. CRFA, gag clause, non-disparagement, negative review, slander, libel, and defamation. So that is the end of my presentation. And I see that Alan is back and I am as well. So we'll entertain any questions that you might have.
We have one here, Charlie, for coaching consulting space. If we send out a contract via DocuSigns and it's standard, is that considered a form contract too?
So the key is, does it permit someone to actually redline it or make edits and changes? If it does not, if it's just to be signed or not signed, then it's a form contract, which again is very similar to an online click-through agreement, or where you check the box, terms and conditions. The choice is to either click or check the box or not. You can't start saying, I want to rewrite paragraph 2. That's the key to it.
Yeah. And we have one from Phil. For the blanket ban on discussing terms and conditions, would that have been okay if they had stopped with that and not included the ban on the posting the negative reviews?
I'm not sure I understand the question, but it seems to say,
look in the question box in the messages where I showed you earlier, and you see it there. It's from Phil.
Yeah, I'm looking right now and I'm seeing at a distance. There's nothing wrong with terms and conditions that are not negotiable. In fact, that's what you see as a general rule in online marketing, right? You see click through, I agree. You see what is happening now in more situations than not. Instead of the scroll box with the I agree button attached to it, you're starting to see a checkbox that is unchecked, and you see I agree with and then terms and conditions, which is the link so that you can click and read them or not. And of course, to indicate acceptance, you put a check in that box. So in both the I agree and the checkbox situation for an online agreement, those are form agreements. They do not permit negotiation. But some of my clients have a sort of a double-barreled approach to it. One would be the click-through agreement that I just described, that format. And then every now and then they get an email from somebody that says, I've read your click-through agreement and I really would like to be a customer, but if you can send me a Word file, I'd like to edit a couple of the paragraphs to see if you will agree with it. And so, it's pretty smart business to say, okay, we'll send you one. And it has a signature line there at the bottom. And so it comes back with a few redlined edits, and you can either accept them or not. But at least you're talking about engaging, a customer. Well, in that particular case, when you send out the Word file, it is negotiable, even though it is not actually negotiated, because it's easy to redline a Word document, Word file, right? So if you're sending out Word documents, even if they're not altered or edited at all, they are negotiable and they're not subject to this statute.
Yeah.
But if they're clicking through a check in the box, they are.
Yeah. Can you see Phil's question? Because we still haven't quite answered his question. Can you see it there? It says for the blank.
If you can have a non-disclosure requirement on terms and conditions, that's fine, right? I mean, that's typical in a lot of negotiated contracts. I don't see it very often in non-negotiated contracts. I see it more in very comprehensive contracts that are more aimed at the enterprise market, which is the upper level corporate market, where there might be pricing and all sorts of important information like that in a contract. And almost all, if not all of those, are going to have a clause that deals with confidential information. And, if you have software involved, that's confidential and blah, blah, blah. And many of those will say the terms and conditions of this agreement are also confidential to the vendor. So that's fairly common at enterprise level agreements, not so common, but okay in agreements for smaller businesses. No problem.
What Phil is asking here is says for the blanket ban on discussing terms and conditions, would that have been okay? Oops, now somebody else just posted. Phil just posted again. Would that have been okay if they had stopped with that and not included the ban on posting negative reviews or submitting complaints to the BBB?
Okay, where did they stop? Well, obviously.
He's questioning what you were the actual part of the Hangout where you were about the people who got sued for the blanket ban on discussing terms and conditions. Would it have been okay if they had just stopped with that and not included that you can't post bans on negative reviews and submitting complaints to the BBB?
Yeah, I think I answered it just a minute ago. If you have a clause that says the terms and conditions of this agreement constitute confidential information of the vendor, that by itself is fine. The problem would be if you go that extra step, which I think what you're referring to, and the terms and conditions also include the non-disparagement clause.
Yeah.
In a form agreement.
Yeah.
Now, if it's a negotiable agreement, the classic example, as I've mentioned several times, is a Word file that you send out, you email out. You can, if it's negotiable, you can have a non-disparagement clause in there if the other party will agree.
He asked here, I've heard marketers get feedback from customers. If the customer likes the marketer asks for the review. If they don't like the marketer asks for a different response with no request for a review. Does that seem risky in any way?
I'm having a bad night. I really don't understand the question. Alan, can you explain it to me?
And all I know is I've heard marketers get feedback from customers. If the customer likes it, the marketer asks for the review. If they don't like it, the marketer has a different response with no request for the review.
That's
Like,
fine.
give me good reviews, but don't give me bad reviews.
Yeah, I mean, I think what is involved in the question is if a customer, if there's a dialogue with the customer and the customer seems to like your product or service, and you say, "Wow, yeah, that's cool. We appreciate the comment. Would you be kind enough to give us a review? Maybe write us a little email about how you really enjoyed it." That's fine, right? And
Yeah.
if they call it in complaining, and I wouldn't ask them for anything other than helping them out, right?
Yeah.
So no problem.
Okay. I think that's
Anything
about it. I think that's about it. I'm just going to let it sit for a second. Let's see. Um, Anything else pops in here? I think that's it. I think we're
okay?
good.
A little bit. Is it in order, Alan, for a very quick summary of what's coming up next month in August?
Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
You know, when we talk about FTC law or FTC rules and regulations, they come in different forms, right? In this particular case, there's a federal statute passed by U.S. Congress, signed into law, and the statute provided that the FTC would enforce it. And that's what we've been talking about. So there's a statute that actually describes what is prohibited and what is not, and the FTC has the authority to enforce. The FTC also has a general statutory authority to deal with unfair or deceptive marketing practices, right? And we talk about a lot of that in these Hangouts. And then every now and then, and so the rules and regulations are determined by the individual enforcement actions. So whenever there's an enforcement action that seems to be applicable to online marketers, particularly small business, I tend to jump all over it because there are certain facts involved and there's a certain result. As a result, in most cases, an agreed upon settlement result that is worth mentioning because it tends to indicate what the FTC is going to do in the future in terms of enforcement. So it's important to know. And then finally, what we're having next month is a little bit unusual because the FTC actually writes up certain rules, right? Not very often, but they do sometimes. And next month, we've got two of them. One involving weight loss specifically, but there are really important lessons there that apply beyond weight loss. So they really are on all fours if you're involved in weight loss, but they're really instructive about other matters if you're not. And the other one applies to everybody, I think. Use of the word free in terms of marketing and advertising. And so we have PDF documents that we're going to make available to you for these regulations, and we'll have a what we believe is going to be an excellent summary of the law, and of course Q&A for each of these next month. So stay tuned, and we look forward to having you join us.
Yeah, we have a question here from Charlie. It says, so if I switch from using DocuSign to just a Word doc and send it via email, good old-fashioned signature in blue ink, scanned and emailed back, as far as the FTC concerned, is that considered a negotiable?
I believe it is negotiable, whether they redline it or not. I think you're in good shape. I think it's these form contracts, click through, DocuSign that you cannot change, PDFs which you cannot change.
Yeah.
So I think you're going to be in good shape if you switch to that.
Yeah. Says, are these previous webinars?
Whenever you send a Word file, it's whether it says so or whether you say so or not, it's almost as if there's a huge notice at the very beginning that says, please negotiate me, right? So you're really opening the door for, negotiation. Now, if you're lucky, and most, if not all, just sign away without negotiation, you're really in good shape. But it tends to invite negotiation when you send a Word document.
Yeah. And I don't think we have any. Charlie, are there previous webinars, Hangouts, that I can watch to discuss the topic of using the word investment in a coaching space for FTC enforcement? I don't think we have anything that has like a tag.
I don't think so. I think I'm very confident.
Coaching stuff. There's coaching. We have. I think there's some that might be coaching, some word tags for coaching, right?
Yeah, I believe clearly that. In fact, I can remember a few months back or late last year, I think it may be in the November timeframe,
Yeah.
we had some coaching cases that we talked about,
Yeah.
and every now and then it seems that we have a coaching related case,
Yeah.
but nothing specifically regarding investment.
Investment coaching. Yeah.
I've worked with some clients with investment issues, and one of the questions is, are you a registered investment advisor if you've got some sort of investment related website and business? And that's a big issue that my partner, Rick Jones, who's an SEC specialist, reviews. So, we've done that in the law practice, but we haven't done anything in terms of investment in a hangout. Now, maybe we could add it to the list and talk about it sometime down the road, but we haven't yet.
Yeah. Yeah.
All
All
right.
right. I think we're good.
All right. Good night, everyone. Thanks for
Good night.
attending.